Many Canadians breathed a huge sigh of relief seeing the two Canadians return home to Canada after being held captive in China for more than 1,000 days. To talk about the release of Michael Spavor, Michael Kovrig is political reporter Brian Lilley joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, it was sudden and surprising after almost 3 years of fighting between Ottawa and Beijing. Now the Chinese government is warning that Canada should learn its lesson. What kind of a lesson are we talking about here?
Well, the statements from Ms. Hua, who is a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, were kind of a bit like a threat, Hal. It was strange to watch this play out on Monday morning. Now, I watched it on delay. I didn't watch it on Beijing time, but it was a news conference that, in my view, was devoid from reality. This was a spokesperson for the Chinese government saying things that were factually incorrect. They were playing up Meng's release as, a hero's welcome, which she actually did get. They had, people waving flags and music playing and folks handing her flowers as she got off the plane with a red carpet, I might add. But they also said that her detention was only politically motivated, unlike Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, who, well, these were people committing espionage against the Chinese state, and that there was no connection between the release of Miss Meng and the release of Mr. Spavor. I'm sorry, that is factually incorrect. We know it's not true. Otherwise, why would they be detained immediately after she was detained here in Canada and then released within less than 12 hours? It was a bizarre situation that played out over the course of a day last Friday, in one that few of us will forget. But glad to see both of these men home now.
Absolutely. Now, Brian, officially the line from all governments is that there was no deal to free the two Michaels, but reports indicate that U.S. President Joe Biden intervened to say any deal involving HUAWEI executive WANZHOU must include their release. So who do we believe here?
I'm going to believe the reports that say that there was a deal. Look, this is often the case. Governments will deny all kinds of things. And this is not a slight at the Trudeau government. This is not a slight at the Biden administration or people in Beijing. They come to these agreements. But my understanding is that President Joe Biden actually intervened and said, if Meng is going, then the two Canadians have to be released. Now, unbeknownst to me and probably to most Canadians, there were two Americans who were being detained who were also set free as soon as Meng was allowed to go. So, there was a lot at stake here. China was playing hardball with both countries. You know that I'm a harsh critic of the Trudeau government, but on refusing to engage in a prisoner swap, I have to say they did the right thing. They did the right thing from the beginning to the end on this file. But when the Department of Justice in the United States, and let's be clear, this was not a political move. This started in the Department of Justice during the Obama administration. That's when they first decided that HUAWEI had breached sanctions against Iran, that there were problems. That's when they began building their case. She was only detained during the Trump administration, and that carried on for almost a full year of the Biden administration. So two Democrats and a Republican all on side with this. But it was Biden that stepped in at the end and said, you know what? If we're going to let her go, they have to release the two Michaels. Good on him for doing that. Good on him for getting that through. I think that maybe we could have played our cards better earlier on to engage the Americans, especially during the Trump administration. But there were bad politics between our government and theirs at the time. It didn't work out. End of the day, we're happy that they're home.
Absolutely. Brian, Canada still has not banned HUAWEI from operating in our country or being involved in our 5G system. Why has HUAWEI not yet been banned?
Well, listening to the Prime Minister, it's a bit of a jumbled mess. He's saying that an announcement or a decision could come in the days and weeks ahead. But I mean, this is something they've been ragging the puck on for years. Look, I remember concerns being raised about HUAWEI going back to the Harper decade, as Justin Trudeau likes to call it. And at that point, the Conservatives put in some, I don't know, some boundaries around HUAWEI, but didn't ban them from operating. But, as Huawei started to build and grow, and this is a company that, let's face it, grew upon the remains of what was Nortel, once one of Canada's tech giants, as they continued to grow, the Trudeau government didn't stop them. As our allies said, we will not accept Huawei as part of our 5G network, they didn't say no. You could have said, well, maybe while Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor are being held hostage in China, there's a reason not to ban them because it might anger the Chinese government. It might anger Huawei. It could make the situation worse for these two Canadians. But now that they're home, and Justin Trudeau's been asked about it, he's still not saying no. He's saying, well, we'll get to it, and not even making a strident statement. My view, Hal, is that this company should not be rewarded for the behavior of the Chinese government that was undertaken on its behalf. And that's what this is. I mean, Huawei is very close to the Chinese government. It's not like here where there is a separation between state enterprises and the government. This is a as close as you can get to a state enterprise. And these two men were held because the Huawei princess, Meng Wanzhou, was detained on an extradition treaty. China wants an extradition treaty with Canada. They want us to be able to do this sort of thing with them, but they don't like it when we actually follow through on it with their allies, the Americans.
Now, Brian, there was also some concerns raised about the possibility that China interfered in Canada's election. Do we have any proof of that?
Direct proof, no, but enough to warrant an investigation, yes. I spoke to Kenny Chiu recently. He is the former Conservative MP for Stevenson Richmond East. I believe it's Richmond East, could be Richmond West, in the Vancouver area. So my apologies if I got the riding name incorrect. But Kenny Chiu was elected in 2019, represented the area, spoke up on, he's originally from Hong Kong, but yet in this last election, because he and his party took a strong stand against the Chinese government, against the dictators in Beijing, he was targeted. And what was going out on WeChat and other Chinese social media platforms were outright lies about him. And he has concerns that these were put forward either by Beijing or their proxies here in Canada who wanted to overturn the election, who wanted to change the outcome. Now, I'm not going to go out on a limb, Hal, and say that, well, if it wasn't for Beijing, the election result would have been completely different. But there are certain members of parliament who were defeated. Kenny Chiu, Alice Wong, Nellie Shin. So Alice Wong and Kenny Chiu are both originally from Hong Kong. They're both freedom-loving Chinese Canadians who have spoken out against the dictatorship in Beijing. Nellie Shin is a Korean Canadian MP who has also spoken out against the dictatorship in Beijing. And then there are some MPs in Ontario, like Bob Soroya, who represents an area east of Toronto called Markham that has a high Chinese Canadian population. And all of them were defeated. And it's as if there was a direct attempt to influence Chinese Canadians and say, these people are not only against the Chinese government, they're against you. And that's what Kenny Chiu was telling me about, was that he was getting doors slammed in his face by people who had supported him before because they were being told that the Conservatives were against Chinese Canadians, that the Conservatives wanted to force every Chinese Canadian to register as an agent of the state in Beijing. That's not true, but it spread like wildfire on Chinese social media, and it's something that we should take seriously and consider and say, was there an attempt here? Did something happen? It wouldn't change the overall outcome of the election. It might change a seat or two, but it is something we should look into. And I do want to make this clear for everyone. When I spoke to Kenny Chiu, he had nothing but good things to say about the Liberal opponent that beat him. Somebody that he knows well, somebody that he's worked with in the past, and said he doesn't think that there's anything to do with his concerns about interference that came from the Liberal Party. He thinks it came directly from the Chinese government in Beijing.
Now let's circle back to the recent federal election here, Brian. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said everyone needed to be vaccinated against COVID-19. In fact, he campaigned against the Conservatives because Erin O'Toole wouldn't make it mandatory for all Tory candidates to get vaccinated. Yet Trudeau says professional athletes who are not vaccinated are allowed into Canada. Brian, what gives?
Well, it's rules for thee, but not for me, sort of thing. It's rules for the little people, but not the elites. Look, this has been going on for a little while now. Hal, I know you love your sports. I know you love the Blue Jays. You watch them more than me, and I'm 5 subway stops away from Rogers Center. So, you know, the teams that have been coming in, most of MLB is vaccinated, but not everyone. The teams that have been coming in, if they have an unvaccinated player, coach, staff, they're allowed in on what's called a national interest exemption. The Raptors on Monday, this past Monday, announced that any team that has a player who's not vaccinated will be allowed to come in under the same thing, a national interest exemption. And that's also going to apply to the NHL. Now, you can say for the Blue Jays, well, that happened before Trudeau was campaigning saying everyone had to be vaccinated. And think about it, they started playing home games before the election. All during the election, Justin Trudeau was saying someone could be sitting across a plane from you that's not vaccinated and put you at risk. Someone could put your kid at risk. You could be in a restaurant with someone who's not vaccinated. This shouldn't happen. He was breathless. He was desperate. He was saying this had to end. And then on Tuesday, his first news conference after the election, he's talking about bringing in all these vaccine mandates. But he had nothing to say about the fact that his government had given this exemption to the NHL and the NBA. So think of a player like Andrew Wiggins, great Canadian player from the Toronto area, born and raised in Thornhill, just north of the city of Toronto. He plays for the Golden State Warriors. They play out of San Francisco. Guess what? He won't be allowed to play home games for his own team, but he can come to Canada. He can fly into Canada, play at Scotiabank Arena for against the Raptors, sorry, and that's fine. But Canadians that fly in from Lethbridge, let's say, can't watch a Raptors game. Well, they can't get on the plane if they're not vaccinated. They're going to have to show their vaccination status to get into the game. All of this shows that COVID rules are really subjective when it comes to the Prime Minister. I said during the election, Hal, he only cared about COVID as a political tool to beat up his rivals, and this is just another example of that.
Brian, at his first news conference after the election, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he was keeping Chrystia Freeland on as finance minister. He also said that the election gave him a mandate to work harder and faster on his agenda. Brian, does the PM not realize that he lost support this past election?
I'm sure he realizes it, but he really doesn't want to admit it. He was asked directly, why are you still leader? Shouldn't you step down given your lack of support? And he just kept talking about, no, Canadians gave me a mandate to work harder, to work faster, to go through with all the things that we promised we would do. And you're looking at him saying, wait a minute, you lost popular support. Between the 2015 election and the 2021 election, the Liberals have lost about 1.5 million votes. I think it's probably 1.4 and change, but almost 1.5 million votes. And he's acting like he just won a majority. He's talking like he won a majority. He is going to go as hard and fast as he can. And maybe this is a lesson for the Conservatives. Next time you win a minority government, don't act as if you won a minority. Just go ahead and do what you can, because that is what Justin Trudeau is going to do. There are things that he wants to do that the Bloc and the NDP, two parties seen as being on the progressive side, that they're aligned with him, that they won't agree with him on. He's still going to push ahead on these things. So we could end up in an election sooner rather than later. We'll have to wait and see. But what do we know about when things are coming back, Al? He said that he would swear in his cabinet sometime in October and recall Parliament before the end of fall. So I looked at my calendar. That's just before a date we call Christmas. So sometime between now and the week before Christmas, he will recall Parliament. If he says that he's got to do all these important things, he should be recalling Parliament as quickly as possible. But just like his reason for calling the election, it's not really true.
Brian, we only have about a minute left here, but I wanted to ask you about this here. Brad Wall, the former Premier of Saskatchewan, wrote an interesting piece where he said the Conservatives hit parts of their platform that would appeal to us here in the West. What specifically?
He talked about the Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill. He talked about the one-way tanker traffic ban because tankers can come in, they can't go out, things like that. And he also said that the Conservatives have to figure out how to win without Quebec. And I think that's right. You know the term, Hal. The Liberals say, screw the West, we'll take the rest. Actually, they say something else, but that's the polite way of me saying it. Conservatives need to figure out how to win without placating Quebec. That was all part of Brad Wall's op-ed. He's had Aaron O'Toole has had former Conservative Premier of Ontario, Mike Harris, come out to defend him. He's had Leslyn Lewis come out to defend him. Now he's had Brad Wall come out to defend him. Hopefully, the Conservatives figure out that maybe they should focus on winning instead of attacking each other in the months ahead.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.